So in 2008, I went down to Peru for a few years of ayahuasca journeying all over the States. And I didn't exactly know what until I came out the other side I was going down there for. But it turns out I was going to face my deepest fear. And that deepest fear was losing my mind.
Psychedelics are said to shift our fixed perspectives, giving us a bird's eye view of our own lives and helping to remove the lenses of cultural, religious, and social conditioning through which we are taught to see the world. They are being used therapeutically and somatically to treat depression, addiction, PTSD, and trauma, and many are using them to explore the ineffable, those unknown realms of consciousness and beyond. Join us in Adventures of the Psyche as we learn how psychedelics have transformed people's lives. Hello, friends, and welcome. Today we are being joined by Ryan Beauregard, who will share the story of how contraindications from an ayahuasca dieta brought him head-to-head with his greatest fear of losing his mind, and the wisdom that came out on the other side. Ryan has a BA in psychology and has spent 10 years mentoring at-risk teens and families through wilderness survival skills and nature connection. He's also the programs manager for the MAPS Zendo Project, where supportive spaces at music festivals are created for guests undergoing difficult psychedelic experiences or other psychological challenges.
It was 10 days, isolated for everybody in their own hut. Every other day we did ayahuasca, and in the interim, or in, I guess, the day-to-day of our dieta, it was no books, no journals, no toothpaste, no soap, just kind of a little hut that had an attached bathroom, and just there to feed on our minds for 10 days, which, gosh, I think that was its own crazy making for me, just to not have a book or a journal to kind of have something to focus on. But what the end result was for me was wrapping up a 10-day dieta with this Chirk Sanango admixture that was part of the dieta. And I was just spun out. Something about my, I think, metabolism, as well as later finding out that cannabis and Chirk Sanango had a fairly negative interaction. And the combination of the two kept me up for days on end after we officially wrapped the dieta, and experienced a really strong synchronicity one morning after being in that kind of manic state, unable to sleep for a few nights, and found synchronicity in the form of a beautiful giant butterfly that took me and led me away from my group into this garden, landed on a mushroom, and the synchronicity just kept building and building, encouraging me to eat this mushroom. And I just want to say that I've got, 7 years of supporting kids and adults in nature doing wilderness survival. And one thing that we've learned out there is you don't put anything in your mouth that you don't know what it is, right? Could be poisonous, it could make you sick, but especially with mushrooms, very likely they'll kill you. And for whatever reason, I was so convinced that I needed to eat this mushroom that I did. And the results of both being in that kind of manic and heightened state after the dieta, as well as being sleep deprived, where whatever I had taken in with this mushroom, I was pretty clear I was about to die. I think at this point, I've been pretty convinced that we are living in some form of a simulation, whether that's, from more of the sci-fi perspective, or the idea that God has, God, however you want to put that label, source, whatever, the divine has split itself into all these fragmented consciousnesses, and we get to play the game of being awoken to our true self, our true nature. And so that had always resonated with me, but it felt like once I found myself in this sort of Matrix, Groundhog Day, Truman Show simulation of reality, that felt like it was trying to prevent this death, that it was like too early in the psychedelic timeline of 2008 to make a bad name around ayahuasca or psychedelic healing, and that it felt like this I mean, ridiculous now, but like this galactic intervention of like, we can't let this kid die. We gotta keep resetting him. So it was like almost this, gamification of like game over, but you get an extra life. And so that was going on for days, down in Peru, and had an amazing group of people bring me home. But in the time that they were handling me, kind of like babysitting, I attempted to run away a few times. I donned other clothing of like workers in hostels and hotels that we were staying, and the idea that I would maybe be another avatar and invisible to my group if I was wearing a different set of clothing. And, was really convinced that there was some form of the matrix. If I could talk to the architect and just figure a few things out with the simulation, I could help repair it. And it became clear to me that I was living in a different simulation than my group. They were trying to help me through things, but maybe not seeing the world in the same way I was. There was a conversation that I had with a friend of mine who we've been doing psychedelics since we were young. And I think he was one of the few voices of reason that I was willing to even consider at that time, that was basically had posed to me, how long do you need to be here? If this is like some beautiful, hot tub of divinity that you're immersed in, like how much of you has to become a raisin before you realize that you've been oversaturated and you need to get out of the hot tub and come hang out with us and tell us about the hot tub and tell us about how nice and warm and lovely it was in there, and that maybe we should all hang out in the hot tub, but perhaps you've spent too much time alone in the divine hot tub. Come hang out with the rest of us on this world. And I think there was some version of that reality check that was really helpful for me. It then took months and months of really coming to acknowledge what was going on, making amends, making repairs and apologies to the missteps that I had done along the way. I feel like so much of this was the reminder of the power of mind and consciousness, and the idea that my biggest fear that I didn't know I was going to face was losing my mind. And on the other side of it, the gift of recognizing that we can lose our mind and with the right support come back and be here to be of service and others who have gone maybe further than they intended, to be beacons, to be guideposts for those to find their way back home. And ultimately to find deeper purpose and meaning in our life's work, and how we're supporting those things. Because I'll just say in the variety of conversations I've had with other people who are having or have had similar experiences, it's a strange overlay of the similarities, no matter what the religious background or place that we grew up, or even belief systems that we've adopted, how there are these different, delusions of grandeur, or being in the simulation, or feeling these like galactic missions that we're here to accomplish through these experiences. And I do believe that there are some beautiful truths, as well as some misalignments that we put onto our own egoic interpretation of otherwise just the idea of like, you're just here to be in the state and nothing more. You're not here to interpret it or solve it. And I think I'll just in some ways summarize with this. There's something I think that is so beautiful about the expression I learned as a kid from the indigenous sort of perspective of God or the divine being referred to as the great mystery. And I think there's a really lovely surrender that we can have in our consciousness when we stop trying to figure out this thing that maybe is never meant to be solved. It's not an equation that is here to be solved, but rather a feeling or an experience that's meant to be present.
That resonates on so many levels.
Awesome.
And at the same time, I'm still like, ooh, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. Me too. It never goes away. And I think there's that coyote aspect of being human and having this experience. It's like, come closer. I'm going to tell you all of the secrets. And it's like, I'm fucking with you. I'm just playing with your head. Like, you're not allowed to know the secrets until you leave this body. You figure them out on the other side, but I can't tell you here.
one of the biggest struggles you've had in your life was the fear of losing your mind. And then you got to come head to head with that through a psychedelic experience and come out on the other side.
Mhm.
Is there anything you would share to other people who are struggling similarly? Because even though you did it, it took you 3 months, and that sounds kind of like some shit.
Yeah, I'll first off say, like, don't try this at home. I wouldn't suggest that path to anyone. I mean, like, really, when I came out the other side, I was like, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. It was so debilitating, so disorienting. And I really have to say that I know everybody's different in their constitution. I think that honestly, I would not have made it without community. I think I feel so blessed for that network of folks that didn't know what to do with me, yet still were looking after me. And I think there's a lot to be said. That's a big lesson of just accepting some level of responsibility for folks who can't take care of themselves.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, community, all of you out there. Oh my God.
So much gratitude.
Okay, and briefly, can you touch on how this has launched you into your current job with MAPS as the program director for Zendo?
Yeah, absolutely. So for 4 years after this, I didn't touch and had no interest in psychedelics or any sort of psychedelic field. I had found myself teaching on the festival circuit, which then created a introduction to some of this work within MAPS. I went up to the Oakland conference in 2013, took a day-long psychedelic support course, and just found myself embedded with Zendo Project ever since. It felt like I was finally able to pay back as well as pay forward the amazing community support that had been given to me. And I was just blown away that there was an actual organization that did this as their mission and vision. And now
what do they do?
So Zendo Project creates safe spaces for folks having psychedelic challenge or psychedelic crisis, drug-induced or otherwise. And so that can just be emotional overwhelm of being at an event like Burning Man or another festival, whether it's alienation or just feeling the vibe of difference, that this is not like, we're not in Kansas anymore, this is a different world. And so the idea is community support.
Ryan, thank you so much for sharing your story, for living your truth, and continuing to support others on their own journey as well.
You got it. Yeah, it's an honor.